Screams and Streams, the podcast that looks at the best and worst horror movies as rated on Rotten Tomatoes from 1970 onwards. I'm your host, Mike Caron, and with me is my co-host,
Chad Campbell.
Before we get to today's films, we'd like to invite you to check us out on Instagram. Our handle is @ScreamStreamPod. Also, be sure to check out our website at www.screamsandstreams.com. That's Screamsandstreams.com, where we have information about our episodes, links to our research, and our watchability scale, where we rank all of the films we are looking at. And please be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe to our show on any of the platforms where you get your podcasts. Just a warning, in the podcast, we do jump around in the plot when we are discussing the details, and we may end up spoiling the film if you haven't had the chance to see it yet. If you are someone who doesn't like spoilers, we recommend that you stop listening now, check out the film, and then rejoin us for our discussion. And today, we're going to be looking at Robert Fuest's 1970 And Soon the Darkness. Last week, we spent some time with the critically and audience acclaimed Bird with the Crystal Plumage. In a turn of self-flagellation, we've decided to look at this one because it has a 29% Rotten Tomato score, but an audience score of 63%. Some movies were considered worse from the year, but we thought this would lead to an interesting discussion because audiences seem to love it.
Yeah, it's weird. It has a 6.6 out of 10 on IMDb, and it says 83% of the people like this movie. I would say I am not part of that 83%, but yeah, we're going to talk about it regardless. We're going to break it down for you. It is easily found, is it not?
It is readily available.
So it's an interesting, I don't know if it's interesting. And maybe I'm painting this bad right away. We're just going to get into this.
All right. So the movie is about two women who are nurses on vacation in Normandy, or the countryside of France, going on a bike ride. On this bike ride, they encounter mysterious or odd characters. They do end up getting separated. One of them disappears. And the second half of the film is the one character searching for her friend while she interacts with these misleading, misappropriated.
As we talked about in the Bird with a Crystal Plumage, how that film did a really good job at distracting you from the outcome. This one, I feel, is really heavy-handed with how they try to distract you.
Yeah, every attempt at a red herring becomes almost comical to the point where it's so over the top it can't be
right
the correct way.
As soon as these ladies are on the road and they start biking, the first person you meet, you're like, well, that guy looks weird. And then they stop at this cafe and there's a lot of weird looks there.
Everyone's immediately suspicious.
Yeah, and they're just staring at them, and it sets it up like they're just beating you over the head that, you know, something's going to happen. If you were going into this blind, we actually read about it before we went into it, but if you're going into this blind, the minute you started watching it, you'd be, well, obviously something's going to happen.
Well, it's interesting you say that, just because the music at the very beginning, you have these two women riding their bikes slowly through the countryside, and it's just this like la la la.
It's a disco kind of happy tune, right? Yeah. And they play it throughout the film. Mm-hmm. At the first cafe, they have it low while Jane, the brunette, is trying to plan out their route, and Kathy's just kind of sitting there looking at dudes.
Kathy is on vacation for one reason, and she lets the audience know right away what that reason is.
Oh, yeah. Out of the gate. And I've traveled in my youth, and there are a few things that bothered me about this film, just with the traveling aspect of it. Number one, the way they're dressed. Kathy and Jane are not dressed to be biking cross country.
No, they're in short shorts and heeled sandals.
Kathy, supposed to be this beautiful blonde bombshell, has this gold waist
gold chain link belt. Yes.
That comes across. They're in sandals that like flip-flops.
But they have about a 1-inch heel on them.
And she's got a shirt tied as Daisy Duke style. Whatever. Fair enough. It's that kind of movie, I guess. Jane is the more sensibly dressed, even though she's still in short shorts and sandals. And they have these bags that would probably fit maybe a change of clothes.
Yeah, they're definitely not going on long distance rides, but it seems like that's what they want the audience to believe.
Yes. and they don't have any camping gear. They don't have any sleeping bags. They don't have any food. They don't have anything that would make you think that they're going to stop off at the side of the road or do anything. So obviously they're looking for hotels on this trip. And the other thing that bothers me is Jane does not let Kathy in on the plans of the travel. Kathy has no sniff as to where they're going. She complains about, we're on the road all the time. They're biking as slow as anybody could possibly bike.
I was going to save that comment for later. That was something that bothered me so much. This was at the end of a long day of biking, and you are tired and you are going uphill slow level of riding. Like, they were barely pedaling, barely pushing. And it's like,
barely pedaling, yeah.
Maybe they were doing 10 kilometers a day at that pace.
There are multiple things that bothered me about this movie. Timeline is one of them. I don't know. It's day forever, and they bike forever, and she gets rides.
They play with geography so much in this movie.
Well, that's what I don't know. Like, how far are these towns apart from each other? Like, I'm so frustrated with the locations in this film that it just drives me nuts.
We're really getting into the meat of what we're going to talk about
I
later.
know, sorry. It's just like, this is the intro, and I'm just already going off.
We're just trying to summarize the film, and clearly you can understand our take on this before we even get our topics.
As I say, usually our first category is first impressions. So first impressions, you could probably guess, I wasn't a huge fan of the film. These are the first impressions that I got, and we've kind of talked about them already. Worst travelers ever. Clothes were inappropriate for what they were doing. The route, nobody knows what route they're going on except for Jane, and they can't speak the language, so they decide to go on the back way, where probably your chances of meeting someone who speaks English are slim to none.
And yet in almost every village, they do meet someone who speaks English, is British. My first impressions, very similar. For me, it's hard. I watched our two movies from 1970 back to back. And if you listen to our first episode, we took issue with the editing and writing of Bird with the Crystal Plumage. So coming into this film, I would say the editing doesn't leave us asking for much. It's fairly well edited. Things are fairly well established and shot.
Yes, I agree.
The writing we can tear apart later. So right away, I was like, oh, this is a much more enjoyable film to watch in that aspect. But that was about it. I had trouble with all the characters. I had trouble with the acting. I had trouble with Paul's accent. I still don't know if that was a French man or a British man lying to them. Was I entertained for the hour and a half? Yes. But that's all I can give you. I wasn't angry that I watched it, but I definitely wouldn't be running out to recommend this one.
It was pretty weak, I would say. Paul, his whole character bothered me from the get-go. I was annoyed at how he seemed kind of this skulky, lurking character. And we'll get into this later, but there are just moments with him that bothered me.
If you want to visualize him, if you haven't seen the film, it's Richard Ashcroft on a Vespa. The instant they cut to him, I was like, oh my gosh, like I had to think about, how old is Richard Ashcroft? Did he act in a movie? Because it's Richard Ashcroft from The Verve.
I know, yeah, it's totally him. Yeah, for sure. Let's go down the list of these categories here. So we have tropes.
Hall of Shame.
Hall of Shame.
I only have two. The first one is, and I don't know if this is a horror movie trope, but you know, blondes are overly sexual, oversexed, right? Kathy, the blonde woman in the film, that's all she seems to talk about, all she seems to care about. She just wants to relax, have fun, find some guys, and possibly that's how she wants to find a room for the evening. Whereas Jane, the brunette with a far more practical haircut, she's played very straight. No, we are here. We are not here for fun. We will move on.
We've got a lot of miles to make before we get to our next spot. Yeah. We got to keep going. We got to keep going. Yeah.
And even like, oh, you're so like saucy for looking at that man. And she's almost embarrassed that Kathy's even talking about someone across the cafe at the beginning of the film.
Yeah. Kathy's the one that wants to meet everybody, and Jane's the one that just wants to like get to these different places. Right. Tropes for me was, I guess, like later in the film, there's some hiding in a closet that happens that really it's just overdone, right? So there's that. I agree with you with the stereotypical labeling of the women. There is a scene where Kathy just goes into her bag and decides to hang her underwear just on these random branches. We don't even know why they're wet, what has happened. So we assume that she's done laundry. There is a scene where she does wring it out.
Yeah. Right. But until that moment, it looks like dry clothing.
Yeah, it does.
She's just hanging around her in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very weird.
It was. And there's one bra and these two pair of panties that sounds weird now, but we will talk about later. I don't know how to make that sound. She hangs these up and then she's just hanging out.
Sorry, I can't get off that part because they were already laying in this sort of wooded roadside stop out on their bike ride for half an hour. We don't know.
The timeline's crazy. I don't know how
she
long.
could have hung that underwear up when they first got there. But nope, she has to wait at least an hour, then hang everything up.
Here's the thing. The movie starts and they're riding their bikes. And so you get this idea that they're on a trip together, obviously. And then they stop at this cafe and then they see this dude over on
Richard Ashcroft on a Vespa.
Yeah. And Kathy's attracted to him. And so she wants to meet him, but she won't go talk to him and he doesn't go talk to her. Jane's like, okay, we got to get going. So they get on their bikes and they start biking. So now every time Kathy hears any kind of motorized vehicle, she keeps looking back. The first time, obviously, it is the guy and he comes by. Paul is his name, correct? Yeah. So he comes by and passes them, but he goes right by them. And so Kathy gets very upset.
Right.
She's annoyed. You can see in her face, which I guess is the best part of Kathy's acting. You see in her face that she's annoyed that he didn't stop and want to talk to her. So they get to the next spot. And then Kathy all of a sudden decides that she wants to wait. And it's very upsetting for Kathy that this guy is not hitting on her. So they're moving on. Jane wants to get going. She wants to get to the next village and everything. And then Kathy decides that she's had enough. This guy's not following her. He's not engaging with her. So she's just going to wait.
She's the side of the road. Lay out in the sun. Lay on the side of the road.
That's what I want to do. And I want to meet people. And she gets mad at Jane for wanting to continue on the trip. They have a big fight. Jane takes off. Kathy stays, pretending to have an enjoyable time as she sunbathes in this grassy bush.
Yeah, there's a wooded bit on the side of the road. It's a little break in the woods. They're laying there, and yeah, she's just going to sit and wait because she wants Paul to drive by again so that she can entice or catch his attention.
Yes, and Jane picks that up. She's like, are you mad because we're not meeting that guy? And then she says no, but it's obviously the reason because she spends forever there. Jane goes on to the next spot and decides to wait. And so that's about, I don't know, not midway through the movie. We're about 30, 40 minutes in. Yeah.
And so while Jane has moved on, Kathy's in this little glade, relaxing. And I don't know what motivates her to maybe get up and move on, but she goes and she looks and a pair of underwear is missing. And while she's looking off in one direction, she hears a loud noise. And this is one of my sort of things to pick apart with this film. She turns around and her bike is laying on its side. The back tire is spinning like it had been going 20 kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
And then her front spokes are completely ripped out. But all we heard was like slight, like, ching, and that was it.
All we heard was her bike fall.
Yes. And it destroyed the bike, apparently.
And it would take some time to cut because those spokes were removed.
Yeah.
They weren't just cut. They were removed. And so half the spokes on her front tire were removed. The bike had fallen over and she's like, She runs up, tries to flag down one guy and he just speeds right by her.
Did you think something was going to come from that? It's this Mustang that just roars by. Mm-hmm. I thought that would play more in the film because everything else has played into the film so far.
I definitely thought we would have revisited that. I thought that would have been someone that got into the town to talk to Jane a little later, but no. It was just a guy.
Just a guy.
Driving super fast down this road, yeah.
Cut to Kathy on her own, and then an unseen assailant attacks her, and that is pretty much the last that we see of Kathy.
Right.
So the film then shifts to Jane's perspective where Jane realizes she's waited a little too long, doesn't know what's going on. There's a great scene at the cafe that she's at that we'll talk about a little bit later. Based on what she's told at this cafe that the road is bad, she starts to get worried. And this is where the geography of the film really starts to become questionable because from the glade to the cafe, we've passed by a policeman's house or a gendarme, and she seems to ride her bike back and forth between those two spaces very easily and very quickly. And she even goes back to the previous village quite easily as well.
Yep.
Landron. But this is where the film becomes frustrating because she seems to be able to ride her bike at ease between these spots within 10 to 15 minutes because the sun doesn't shift in the sky. There's no transition in time.
No.
But then they use this geography to also play with us later in the film, and it becomes unbelievable at that point. And the rest of the film is Jane searching for Kathy. Eventually, she does speak with the man on the Vespa, and we find out his name is Paul Salmon, and he tells her that he is a detective with a higher level police force. And he's investigated this murder that happened years before of a young woman, and he's trustworthy. She can rely on him, and he'll help her find Kathy.
There is a scene earlier on where they pass him and he's just hanging out at a graveyard, and he goes into the graveyard and he looks at a grave of the woman that was allegedly murdered there.
Worse than murdered, they say.
Oh, yes. Worse than murder. Yeah. Other things happened is how they said it. So we are led to believe that Paul is an investigator that's going to help them out.
It's like that case he never solved, and so it's always stuck with him or something along those lines.
We move on, and basically that's the film in a nutshell, is Jane going back and forth from the grove to the town until they finally go to this trailer park area for the last 20, 25 minutes of the movie. The first time Jane rides into town on her own, she passes by these cops, and they're all like, woo, woo, look at her, and you get a weird vibe from them anyways. And then that's pretty much all you see of most of those cops until the end. You see one more. And then, yeah, she goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And she's chased a lot by Paul. She's chased a lot by the cop. Our next category is didn't age well. So for me, didn't age well was she meets a British lady in a cafe and she asks for a ride. And conveniently, the British lady has a car that can fit her bike in the back upright. They don't have to do anything. Yeah. And they just put her right in the back and then they drive away. And one of the things she says is this girl was killed. And she says, I believe it was done by one of their own, a nomad.
Right. Yeah. It's instantly judgy, instantly pretentious.
Yes.
Yeah. And then she says it was a loathsome business. And she says this probably 6 or 7 more times, a loathsome business, a loathsome business. She's just another example of all these characters that Jane meets on this quest to find Kathy are just overplayed and odd. They all feel unnatural. They all feel like there's something more to them. It's
right. The British lady was played by Claire Kelly, and she's supposed to be a schoolmistress who teaches French literature in France, but she's English.
Yes.
And you know, you can do that. Yeah, it's fine. For me, that's the part that didn't really age all that well. One-liners, I would almost say the same thing. I don't have a lot of good stuff for these categories because the film just didn't really have a lot going on.
There is the one-liner at the beginning where they're really establishing that Kathy is in France for one reason.
Right.
And Jane's like, we need to move on. And it's like, well, you know, this place isn't swinging. And Kathy's like, well, it's not exactly swinging, but it is dangling. Like right out the gate, they are setting up Kathy and what she wants.
Yeah.
But I did like that line. I hope to one day use that in my normal life.
Other than that, there wasn't really a lot of quotable lines in this film. There was a good portion of it that was French. And so we didn't have subtitles. I'm not a French speaker. And so it was really hard for me to kind of get what was going on in pieces. Like just what they were saying, I could understand obviously where the movie was moving forward, but it also put me in the spot of the character.
Yeah, it does a good job of sort of putting you in that mindset of Jane, who clearly has a very broken understanding of French, and that leads to her struggling to find Kathy and get help to find Kathy. So as a viewer, they put us in that spot. And if you haven't seen the film yet, there's a scene that it's this long argument between a couple and you have no idea what they're arguing about. And Jane's feeling a little bit nervous about Kathy disappearing. And so it really just helps you to understand where she's at or how she's feeling at that moment.
Our next category is stood the test of time. For me, the only thing that I thought stood the test of time were the bikes. The fact that people still bike, they go on these cross-country trips and they'll bike and camp and travel the same way. Otherwise, I really didn't find anything else for myself.
I agree. It was definitely hard. There definitely wasn't a lot of like, oh, this was the gold standard of how they did it and how films should be doing it from there. Looking back at my notes, I noticed something, and I don't know if this has stood the test of time or not, but there is a change or a shift in the eeriness of the film where we see next to the glade where the two women have stopped, there's a farmer who's just scattering seeds, and he's played very creepy, and he's leading to be considered another suspect in the disappearance of Kathy. And I don't know what it was for me, but something changed in the film at that point. I don't know if it was the lighting, the style of shot, or the music, but it did come to feel a bit eerier after that point. And so I thought they did that well. Going back and looking at the film again, I still can't pinpoint what it was, but I felt a little bit more unsettled. Up until that moment, it was just two women biking through the countryside. And yes, this weird guy on a Vespa who's following them has led us to believe something's going to happen. But something did change in the filmmaking. I just can't pinpoint what it was. I would love to say it was the music, but this is going to be sort of one of my issues with the film. This film does have a lot of silence in it. And I don't know if it was a director's choice or if it was just they didn't have enough music to use. There was moments where Paul was pursuing Jane and it would be absolutely silent. So I was like, oh, maybe they're trying to say like, we don't want to give you a cue because if we cue it as dark, maybe we're wrong. If we cue it as light, we give away too much. But it was just these weird, just pure silences, no music. But for a film that was full of so much more music and started with such full music, it felt lacking.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like within the first 20 minutes, we had no downtime from music. And it was the same song, I might add.
Yes.
It was this disco jivey song where they're riding their bikes. Then they're at the cafe and they're talking about what they're going to do. And that same song is just played, but it's in a lower level, which I personally found distracting. I found myself drawn to that song for some reason and not really listening to what was being said in the scene. I don't know. The music didn't really do it for me. Even when there were tense moments, I didn't find it well done. Did you have any back it up moments?
My back it up moment, it's one of the cafe scenes. Kathy and Jane have separated and Jane has ridden on to the next little stop. She pulls over to the side of the road. And there's this woman who comes out and she works at the cafe and she's on the screen for such a little amount of time, but she does so much with it. She doesn't overact. She conveys that sense of fear and urgency that like you are alone on this road. And she tries to tell Jane, like, you shouldn't travel alone. It is a bad road. It is unsafe. And later she's the one that says like, the police are bad. She's kind of our savior in the film. And as Jane is sitting at this cafe and we have this woman who's just grabbing the attention of the viewer, her, I believe, husband comes home and they have this lengthy argument in French. And again, it's not subtitled. So unless you speak French, you're not going to know exactly what it is. Apologetically, my French is fractured at best. What I could get from it was she's accusing him like, you've been gone for 2 hours. Where have you been that would take that long? You must have been with one of your women. And this guy's like, one of these women, you tell these stories, show me this woman because she's not out there. And,
right.
And then poor Jane is in the middle of these two and they're literally yelling across the table at each other. And Jane's lost in this middle, like, oh, what is happening? I don't know what to do. And she doesn't know what the argument is about either. It was the one moment in the film where I'm like, this is well done, well edited, well acted. And I would watch that scene.
It's such an unsettling scene too, because it's just some random cafe at the side of a road. It's got one lone table with a chair. It's got this billowing fire that she's put in this like trash can. It's like this fire pit that she's got going on. It looks like an uncomfortable place to be. And then she comes out and Jane asks for some orange juice and Madame LaSalle comes out and gives her this orange juice, but gives it to her with attitude.
Yeah.
Like just basically slams it down on the table and
How
says,
dare you stop at my cafe?
What are you doing here? And then says, it's trouble. Get off this road kind of thing. She definitely does well with the part she had. That actress's name is Hannah Maria Pravda and she plays Madame LaSalle. But yeah, she does a great job. And it is unsettling. And I guess that would probably be my back it up scene too, because I don't have a lot of back it up scenes in here just because of the acting of that. But I also don't speak French. So it's tough to watch it because there's no subtitles to it. And
we haven't done gratuitous scene.
Oh, gratuitous scene, right. Overly gratuitous.
When we talk about gratuitous scenes on the podcast, usually it's used to talk about violence that is over the top or overly bloody. With this film, there wasn't a lot of overly bloody, overly violent scenes. So for you, what was the gratuitous or overuse in the movie?
So the gratuitous overuse There are two probably for me. I'll give you the first one that was probably the most was Kathy's panties. So she was supposed to hang these up. They go missing. Then Jane picks them up as she's investigating. Then she brings them to the police office. And then they're just constantly around. Mm-hmm. They just seem to be like a new prop that all the actors need to seem to use. And then eventually they become stained and we don't know why they are. There's a character that becomes introduced later who I'm not sure why he's introduced.
It's the deaf father of the police officer who's living in the back of the police office.
But he doesn't really add a lot to the story at all.
Other than just being another unsettling, weird character.
Yeah. And he ends up putting the panties on his head and he's trying to make her laugh, I think, but it makes her, even more weirded out, which rightly so. But yeah, so I think that is, for me, the most gratuitous. Is just after Jane finds them, they're in not every scene, but they're a lot.
Yeah, they're always there. I got to agree. That just became weird.
And it just doesn't add anything to it. It's not like they are tracing her through these underwear to where she is. They're just around.
So we can get to the end, the big reveal. Jane's been running around the French countryside, sort of suspicious of everybody. The British teachers played a little odd. Paul is played a little odd. The police officers played a little odd. So she ends up in this abandoned trailer park. At this point, Paul has come back to help her or deal with her in some way. We don't know what. And so she runs away to hide in this trailer park.
Paul is chasing her. Yeah. And she goes and hides in this one caravan or, fifth wheel or whatever trailer. And she gets in the closet of one. Of course, she hides in the closet. And he comes in and he's looking around. There's a scene where he's about to leave, but then Kathy falls forward and falls basically into Jane, because that's where they're storing the body, falls into Jane. And then Jane is able to restrain herself remarkably because her friend has just been slashed up and killed. But my question is, why does she need to be hid? Why are they hiding her in the closet?
Yeah, I don't know.
They don't care. She's eventually going to be, I don't know,
disposed of in some way.
In some way. So, and that area, obviously, because there's a whole bunch of caravans and there's a bunch of luggage in the area, which leads me to believe it's like a lot of those other movies, Wrong Turn, those movies where tourists get basically taken and killed and then nobody knows what happens to them.
So even though we know of 2 murders, this might not be the only 2. It's something he's done frequently.
And is the whole city involved? Is it just the police that are doing this? So that's what is revealed, is that Kathy is killed and Jane is trying to hide from Paul, who she thinks is the killer. Then she runs out after Paul has left and he's way over by the trees and she runs out of that caravan, but he hears her.
So we get a little bit of cat and mouse scene and running and hiding. And Jane, at the point where you don't know who the killer is, Jane defends herself with a rock rather aggressively.
Oh, yeah. That was actually probably, if you were going to go other gratuitous scenes, as far as violence goes, that one was definitely, she beats the crap out of him with that rock.
4 to 5 hits, and the rock gets bloody after the second hit.
Yeah.
So they did that well, and had that been the killer, it'd be like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. But then we find out that we literally just watched an innocent person get bludgeoned.
Right, that's right. Spoiler alert, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
We're going to the end. But if you listen to our podcast about the bird with the crystal plumage, they do a scene in the elevator where the killer is slashing in kind of a point of view way. They kind of do that same technique with the rock here. Yes. Yeah, where the rock is coming at the camera and then it's bloody and stuff like that. But anyways, yeah, so if you don't want to hear anymore and you want to watch this to see the ending, then you should turn it off and watch now. And then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes at the end here.
After Jane has beaten Paul and she thinks she's safe, she turns and, this should have been the clue. She goes to run away and standing just in the trees watching all of this is the police officer with no expression on his face.
Right.
Doesn't call out to her. Had she just kept running, I don't think he would have done anything about it.
No, I don't think so. And she runs into him and basically collapses into his chest and is like, help me, help me, help me kind of thing, right?
Yes. And despite this movie being full of a lot of like voyeuristic point of view shots, the creepiest scene of the movie for me happens at this point.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. This is the most disturbing part of the whole film.
While he's comforting her and holding her, his hand tracks down her back and the camera follows, and then it just goes into her back pocket to grab and hold on. It was so unsettling. Yeah. And this is when Jane realizes that it wasn't Paul who was the killer. It was the police officer the whole time.
And then he proceeds to attack her.
Yes.
And I would have to say, watching this whole film, the last 10 minutes, as far as a horror movie goes, or a thriller or whatever, are the best 10 minutes. Because they're the most unsettling. They're the most disturbing. There's a scene where he's trying to undo her belt. It just seems so raw and so nasty, because she's fighting tooth and nail to get him off of her, and he's just overpowering her, and it's just there's a scene where the camera even goes back, it pans out, and it's kind of a high angle shot, and it just shows the feet and how they're just kind of flailing around and stuff. And it really hits home how awful this really is.
Yeah, the staging of that scene was pretty good in that there are a few shots where they end up behind trees or between trees and it's obscured, and all you see is Jane's face as she's struggling. And at that point, I'm like, what is happening behind that tree? Because it felt like a very uncomfortable scene, even to film. Mm-hmm. When he pulls up her shirt and goes for her bra, I was like, I can't imagine having been on the set for that scene. It just felt a little too rough and intimate.
Yeah.
So when it goes behind the trees and you get that blocked view, it's like that imagination of what else is happening. Where the film fails is they then move out from that obstruction. Mm-hmm. And continue the struggle.
Yes.
And so you sort of get this buildup of like, oh my gosh, what's happening, to, oh, they're still just kind of like
wrestling
back and forth. Yeah. And then, eventually he gets her on the ground and becomes more uncomfortable.
It escalates to the point where you think she's done for because he's choking her while he's trying to rape her. And then out of the blue, he stops and basically falls off to the side. And there's Paul with a big stump, like right? Big branch, he just kind of bonked him. And
I'm laughing through that description of the scene only because it has to be the softest blow to the back of a head.
I thought when the guy first got hit, I thought he stabbed him with something because he stops dead. It's like, oh, and then his eyes get big and then he just kind of falls to the side. But then it's revealed that it's this stump, and you didn't see the swing, you didn't see the stump or anything like that. And if it hit him in the back, it wouldn't have killed him. It would have hurt him, but it wouldn't have killed him. Anyways, this guy rolls off, and then she doesn't even apologize for beating the shit out of him with this rock. Nope. She's like, oh, Paul.
Let bygones be bygones.
Paul is revealed to be the savior. He was not a creep, which is what he was played throughout the whole film. And the cops are actually the bad guys. So the cop get it at the last minute.
And then the movie just cuts to the window over the caravan. We see the legs of Kathy where the body was found, and the rain washes the grime off of that window.
Yes, and that's what my note says, is I was trying to figure, what does that symbolize?
I don't know, because we don't need catharsis at that point. It's not like, oh, we've washed away the crime.
No. And maybe because they've solved it, because that cop is dead and maybe they're moving forward. I haven't done research on this. I just wrote the note. What does that symbolize? Because obviously the director wanted to give us some kind of message at the end. It is a longer scene.
Yeah, it's about 20 to 30 seconds of screen time.
Of just showing her feet and the rain falling on that window. So you kind of wonder what that is. And yeah, maybe that is what it is just that finally the dirty part of this town has been washed away. But if we go to the original theory where is the whole town in on it, then no, that didn't happen.
That doesn't play out.
Then who knows what's going on. And it's pretty messed up if the whole town is just letting this cop do whatever he wants to do.
Well, there's Madame LaSalle, right? She
knows.
She knows. When Jane says, I've called the police, she says, like, oh, the police are bad.
Yeah.
Because we do find out that her husband was wrongfully accused.
Right.
But that window scene didn't sit right with me. And then it cuts to looking at the road. A police car drives into camera. So we assume it's going to the crime scene. And then two women on bikes in the rain ride the other direction.
Ride in the other direction.
And so we get the musical cue from the beginning of the film. So is this like a cycle of it will just continue?
Which is why I made reference to those films, Wrong Turn, and where these tourists get pulled aside.
There's countless, right? Like,
yeah, there's lots of those.
It's the reason why my wife and I don't travel the back roads, because we watched too many of those movies. And I'm like, hey, let's go for a backcountry tour this summer. And it's like, no, there's too many weirdos.
Well, and we've got like the scene. I'm assuming Jane had a map. We didn't see her planning out this route, but she seems to know where everybody's going. But Kathy is just in the dark and is just like, I'm just going to follow along. But they don't have any like travel books. They don't have any phone. I'm not talking about cell phone, but there's no
payphones.
There's not even a payphone on any area. They're just the worst travelers ever.
There is a throwaway line when Jane and Kathy are having their major argument about Kathy wants to just sit and lay in the sun and Jane wants to get going. Jane does say, like, we did plan this trip, because Kathy does say, like, you don't let me make any decisions. You don't let me choose anything. And Jane's like, well, we talked about this before.
Yeah.
But that still plays into the, like, one is practical, one's like kind of on a flight of fancy where it's like, I want to have fun and do whatever I want.
Right. So that's the other thing that bothers me about the timeline on this movie is how long have they been out there? How long have they been traveling? Because Kathy seems extremely frustrated that they haven't been partying and doing stuff. Whereas Jane is just, I want to get to the next spot. Let's go. And Kathy's saying, I want to stop and I want to party and I want to do all this stuff. But really, those backwoods areas, are there a lot of places to party? Any one of those towns, they just look like cafes with
two houses around them.
Yeah, they serve you wine and that's it. And then you're on your way. That was the other thing that kind of got me. There's that scene where the cop comes into Madame LaSalle and she starts pouring that wine and he makes her pour more and fill up the tumbler.
I think that speaks to that past relationship of her husband was wrongfully accused. Mm-hmm. So there's the tension there. And as we know, like, she knows the cops are bad. So
no, and that's kind of what I'm saying. Sorry
that intimidation of it.
Is looking back, I would say, to revisit one of the categories, that was a back it up moment, just to see the tension between those two and what was going on, like the subtext of that.
Right. Yeah,
was really well done.
So there's our back it up scene.
There you go. It took us the whole podcast to get to there.
To find it. There is a moment of greatness.
Yeah. But overall, like I said in the first impressions, not super fun to watch. I'll be honest, there was a scene I did think about many times skipping forward and scrubbing through just because there was a lot of chasing.
This does feel like a film that you could put on 1.5 speed and just read the subtitles as they come up and you wouldn't miss a thing.
No.
Nor would you be taken out of any of the scenes, because like there was a shift in the tone for me, but it wasn't like that was built on for the rest of the film. It was just, ooh, something feels a little off. And then the rest of the film was just, and what's happening next? So at 1.5 speed, I don't think you're missing anything.
We missed the spot where there's this creeper cop's dad is in the back room and he's hidden for a while in the police station. I had mentioned this guy earlier when he puts the panties on his head and he's trying to get her to laugh. I think he's trying to, appeal to her in some way. I don't know.
Like, I'm a gentle guy looking for underwear on my head.
I don't know at what point ever is it a good idea to do that, but he does it. They go outside and they talk about, he says he was a soldier and he pulls out this knife and he rams it into this wooden crate or something. She gets spooked and runs back into the house. And then 10 minutes later, she comes back out and is, Monsieur, she's looking for him. Mm-hmm. And he's nowhere to be found. He's taken off and done something. This is a very small cast as far as actors go. And there are a couple of characters that are still throwaways. That guy is one. And he speaks some French, tells her he's deaf and tells her he's a soldier.
But we spend all that time with him and then never see him again. So what was the point of meeting him in the first place?
Good portion of time with him. And I don't understand what his role really was. And then there's this creeper farmer, which we see Jane pass back and forth. And originally when I first saw him, I thought that guy must be the bad guy. We must see something that happens with him.
Yeah, he's moving weird. He's got a sickle.
Yeah.
He's dragging a box of seed. And at one point he walks away from the grove of woods back to his seed. He's established as something weird, but again, they do nothing with him.
And so you don't even know why he's there. At the end of the movie, you look back on it and I don't know why he was there.
There's even, actually, sorry, we didn't even talk about this. Paul says to Jane, I'm going to go to the woods and I'm going to look around to see what I can find. And so he goes deeper into the woods, and he finds an abandoned vehicle. And under the vehicle is the broken bike.
Yes.
And while he's looking at the vehicle, we see the farmer watching Paul. So as a viewer, I'm like, is that the killer? And he's going to get him. Paul. And then Paul opens the trunk of this car, looks in, there's a musical sting of something.
Yes.
Right? It's like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. There's something there. And he closes the trunk and that's it.
I thought they were going to pan down, and I thought, oh, that's for sure where Kathy is.
That's where I thought the body was too.
But then they close it and he just leaves, and then you're left with,
what was it? And then this is where the film fails again, because it's like, we can't tell you who is good, who isn't. But he keeps saying to Jane, come with me. I found something. But he won't say what he found. Just, I found something. I found something.
He's so cryptic in his responses to her and everything. That's the thing about a lot of things in movies too. If he would have just come out and said, hey, this is what's happening and this is who I am and blah, blah, then there would have been this no miscommunication and she wouldn't have clubbed him with a rock 25 times and he still lived. Like, she bashed his head back. Yeah. I don't see how you're getting up anytime soon.
And yet the softest blow knocks,
knocks
and kills
and
the
yet
cop.
the cop is like done after like that one hit. It's a movie with flaws. It's got, I would say, a good premise, especially for 1970. I tried to watch it with fresh eyes and tried to be not jaded by the horror movies that I've seen throughout the years. And it just didn't hit for me.
And I think there's a reason why we don't know any of the names associated with this film.
Right.
It didn't ring true with the audience at the time either.
And it's pretty forgettable. The only reason why I know some of this stuff is because we made notes on it.
Well, there's things that you've brought up that I was like, right, that was something that happened. I watched the same movie and I didn't remember it.
So overall, if you want something to complain about, I guess go see this film. Apparently it was redone in 2010 with Amber Heard and Carl Urban, who I love in The Boys, but probably not so much in this.
And I think there's a reason why when we talk about The Boys, we don't talk about Carl Urban and Soon the Darkness in 2010.
That's right.
Carl Urban from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, from a lot better things than what this was. So in any case, that's And Soon the Darkness, film about two ladies trying to travel. They get into some bad situations because, first of all, they're idiot travelers. That's the biggest thing. Like, and then there's two other people on the same bikes at the end.
Yeah.
The two other people on the same bikes, and then we saw, I think about 50 minutes in, there's some people that come into that town, and then those other guys on their 10 speeds come around and are like,
yes.
and then they
run
take
together.
off. Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's safe and safety and group.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
Before we get to our bonus features, you mentioned the title, And Soon the Darkness. Does the title make any sense to you in the context
no,
of
because
the
it's
film?
all daylight. It's
all
shot
daylight.
in all daylight.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, about 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, all day.
Yeah. So I was really sitting on that, like, And Soon the Darkness of Man's Soul. But even if you're going for a metaphorical title, it
misses the mark. It doesn't really explain what the movie is or has anything to do with it. There's literally no darkness in this film other than the creeper cop who is dark. So I guess they must be referencing him. It's a weird title.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. No.
But if someone said to me, do you want to go see a movie called And Soon the Darkness? And they're like, it's a horror movie about the countryside. I'd assume it's pulling in at dusk. It's like a Strangers type thing where you're settled in and then the darkness comes and then the creepy locals come to attack you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think that almost like The Hills Have Eyes kind of deal.
Right.
Yeah. But it would have been cooler actually if when they went to that caravan area that there were some people in there that kind of chased her around and made it freakier.
Or we're in on it. Right?
Oh yeah. You know, what are you doing here kind of thing. But there was
just
nothing.
one rogue cop.
It's just this abandoned area that this cop showed up at and
Seems to have the run of.
yeah.
Yeah.
And nobody does anything about it. Like, I don't know. It's just confusing.
That's the movie we need, is why is everyone afraid of that cop? Like, we almost need to see the movie of or I can't remember how much earlier it was, like 3 years earlier. We need that
Origin story as to why this guy.
What was the 1967 murder and what happened in those 3 years that made everyone afraid of him?
Mm-hmm. All right. So into the backstory or behind the scenes research stuff. Yeah.
The budget was £260,000, which in today's money is 5.2 million US. And I feel like I want to know, where did that money go? You definitely don't see it on the screen. You don't hear it in the quality of the audio or the music. So maybe it was just a bunch of British people wanting to go on vacation in France and make a movie.
Yeah, it could have been. I don't know. It seems fairly expensive for what they had. Mm-hmm. Is it a Vespa?
Yeah. Bikes,
and a couple of rundown cafes, right? And a few actors. Like, it's a small cast. It's got maybe 10.
And it feels like even the lighting seemed fairly easy because it's all just daylight. I don't think they needed a lot of key lighting on this.
No, they seem to film, like we said, at the same time of day the whole time. So she's going back and forth. And as you had mentioned, the sun doesn't seem to adjust. They just filmed during that afternoon.
So something that came up and is mentioned a fair bit when you look in this film, not that there's a lot about it, and I think that's kind of telling, but the company that was behind this was also behind the old TV show of The Avengers. And so Robert Fuest, the director, worked on The Avengers.
The television series.
The television series, yes.
So let's...
Yeah, with Emma Peel.
Yeah.
Yes. Not the Uma Thurman of the 90s, not the Avengers of the Marvel MCU, but the Avengers of the British television series. Robert Fuest, you look through his credits and it's the Avengers TV series and Wuthering Heights seem to be his big hits. Brian Clemens, one of the writers. So here's where it tells you where the quality is. Highlander 2 and Highlander the TV series. Terry Nallian, I think, wrote an episode of MacGyver and wrote some Doctor Who. Laurie Johnson, who did the music. Surprisingly, such things as Dr. Strangelove and Anchorman. So
really?
Yeah. And Dr. Strangelove, everyone knows the Vera Lynn song, but there is some good music and use of music in that one. Ian Wilson, the cinematographer, the only thing that I saw of note from their back catalog is The Crying Game. But again, that's a movie that doesn't really stick out for visual. It's a gritty film and it's, I guess, well shot, but nobody was like, oh, it's a great cinematographer on that one. And the last thing I have is Dennis Schwartz in the review, I think summed up the movie perfectly. A well shot but unpleasant and unimaginative picture.
I have a review from Time Out. They described it as an unappealing women in peril thriller, which is predictable, implausible, and not a little nasty. It was listed 7th in the Cinefantastique list of top 10 sci-fi horror films in the 1970s.
Really?
And Frederick S. Clark, the magazine editor for Cinefantastique, said it was a lady in distress picture that for suspense tops anything of its kind.
I think we need to look into the repertoire of those critics.
Of Cinefantastique?
Because I take...
Yeah, no, I don't believe that. Apparently the film did moderately well at the box office. I don't have numbers, but that's what it says on the Wikipedia page here. On both sides of the Atlantic, but was not a big success.
I'm going to have to look into Cinema Fantastique because I don't understand how you can say that.
I think they're just loving it because it was filmed entirely in France.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It seems like there are some mixed reviews with this film. I am not a fan.
Yeah. Well, like we said at the top of it, the Rotten Tomato critic score, 29%, but the audience score 63. So it is divisive.
Yeah. It's a mixed bag.
I don't understand.
I don't understand either. Yeah. For me, it missed the mark. Title, acting,
character.
Costumes, lighting, everything. Just did not hit with me. So I would say it's a miss, but if you want to experience it for yourself, go ahead.
Thank you very much for listening to us. Be sure to check out our social media pages. On Instagram, we are at ScreamStreamPod with no S's. Stop by our website, www.screamsandstreams.com, to check out information about all of our episodes and the films we have covered so far. And please subscribe, rate, and comment on our shows on any of the platforms where you get our podcasts. Until next time, this has been Mike and
Chad.
Have a great day.